Hello team, it's been a minute, hope everyone's been well. Since it's been such a long time, I wanted to kind of give you all a bit of an insight into what we've been up to and give you a run through our new core product, our core financial model. This is a simplified version of the core financial model, but it'll give you an idea of some of the key mechanics that are in the financial model. Our fuller version has a bit more detail, but this gives you a really good starting point to understand sort of the core financial model and concepts you'll find in the model. So a few things to cover, just getting around in the model, understanding some inputs, outputs, some like key legend ideas, the navigation, so getting around the model, as well as core input sections and how that all works. As well as some of the key outputs from the model. If we start with just getting around in the model, it's a simplified version. In the fuller model, you'll see a few more tabs. So when there are more tabs, it obviously creates a bit more challenge to get around in. So a table of contents has been provided, so you can always get to your table of contents by going to the top left cell in any sheet. And that'll get you to the table of contents, and likewise you can get to any sheet from the table of contents. Table of contents takes us to our sort of core outputs in the model. So the monthly financial, or MFS, this is our core set of financial statements. There is a middle step which is called the source of truth that we're not going to cover in this video, but that is actually the core output. But for the purpose of this video, the monthly financials is where you'll spend a lot of your time. So monthly financial statements, you've got your variance statement. So, budget variance, doing actuals, budget, actuals year to date, full year. And we can, also find space to provide commentary and all of these reports are printable for the purpose of, management reporting and so forth. Then we have our core inputs page, so M_inputs. This is, unless you have custom drivers, the M_inputs will be the core input section in the model. Depending on how complex or how simplified you want your drivers to be, this sheet could go down quite a bit. You'll see there's a standard content section and some customized content, but depending on how customized your model is, this could run down quite a bit, or it could just be as simple as 3 or 4 sections if you have quite a basic model, which in some instances it actually works a lot better for people having a basic model. So those are the core sections, and there's also a check section that I should also mention. So checks will take you anywhere in or lead you to anywhere in the model where there is either an error, an alert, an unmapped item. I will cover mapping, as well as a refresh as well. So in some versions of the model, a refresh is required, and we will flag that. Refresh being it's built with Power Query in the back end, so there is a requirement to refresh depending on certain calculations that you make. But errors in the model being, logical errors, balance sheet doesn't balance, that kind of stuff. Alerts are more along the lines of there's not a logical error in the model. The assumptions just create a scenario that you want to be alerted to. So, for example, in the monthly financial statements, it could be, negative cash. In your outputs, negative values that aren't expected. So alerts are more just attention, items that require attention, but not necessarily wrong with the model. Unmapped is something in the model is not mapped to an account. So that leads me to mapping, which is actually a crucial part in the model. Mapping occurs to the right of every part or every section in our model that requires mapping. So you'll see it in the monthly financials. You'll also see it in the M inputs. So mapping is a core concept of how our model works. It requires that basically every driver that calculates an outcome needs to get mapped into the financial statements in some way, shape or form. And this allows us to have maximum flexibility with the amounts of drivers that are in the model. Also, many drivers covering one particular aspect or one button. So a common one we have is looking at an inner year and an outer year framework, where in the inner year, you might focus more attention on detailed amounts, dollar figures, because the budget might already be available and you might already know the numbers that need to go in there. Whereas in an outer year framework, you might look more to drivers that are pre-calculated. So for example, for SaaS businesses, in a year, you might look at deferred revenue on the actual subscriptions, because you already know, especially if they're large recurring subscriptions, you might know your specific subscriptions and list them out in detail. Whereas in the outer year, the framework is more around looking at new to business, maybe the churn on that new to business, and that kind of driver logic. Likewise with more basic revenue, you might know the dollar revenue up until the end of the financial year, but then beyond the financial year, you haven't done the budgeting process and you're looking more at things like year-on-year growth or month-on-month growth. If you're a scaling up business, month-on-month might be more relevant, or if you're quite a seasonal business where you need seasonality to come through, then a year-on-year growth tends to be a bit more relevant. So regardless, as long as we have some form of driver calculating an output, as long as we map that driver into the financials, we do have a framework around GST in here as well. So this is also very Australia-centric, very similar application to other value-added taxes or sales-based taxes as well. So it's quite applicable across the board, but it's very Australia-centric. So GST, as well as whether there's payment and timing delays that need to be calculated or passed in. So, we have essentially layers of mapping, and our framework also allows for more layers to be added in future if required. But the concept there is, even on the P&L, the balance sheet, there's a mapping framework. So you've got your mapping 1, mapping 2. All of those builds up to a cash flow statement. So our cash flow statement is direct in presentation by default, but that's just purely how we've set it up, because we find that a lot of people are used to reading it this way, but nothing's stopping you from having your cash flow statement headers as something like starting with EBITDA, moving down through interest, depreciation, taxes, to get to an indirect presentation. And the idea being you would map each one of these P&L line items up to EBITDA to an equivalent cash flow line item. So you could create an indirect cash flow statement as well from an operating cash flow perspective. On the balance sheet side, the more detail on your balance sheet, the more you can then line by line allocate line items into a cash flow statement line. So mapping is crucial in our model, and we're not going to cover the source of truth, but even within our source or SOT, there is quite a heavy layer of mapping as well. You will see a few buttons around the place. They are built in to scale the model, so adding new items or adding new P&L accounts or balance sheet accounts. That's sort of all sitting there available. So this is just a very quick rundown run through the simplified version of our financial model. If you have further questions, or if you're just curious to have a quick chat, give us a yell, info@themangomethod.com.au, or you can reach out to me, Jun at themangomethod.com.au. Look forward to speaking to you further.